What do you get when you mix a manga art style with a cyberpunk type of scenario with a clockwork orange type of vibe and setup with gangs going to war with each other? Well, you're going to find out in our review of Bad Omens Concrete Jungle #1. Let's talk about it in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions, and this is our review of Bad Omens Concrete Jungle #1 from Sumerian Comics. And in this issue, we follow a blossoming gang war between the Bad Omens gang and the Atomic 6 crime syndicate for control of a priceless art museum. But before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notification. Your attention is greatly appreciated. Make sure to stay tuned to the end for the final rating and score. Now let's get into the credits. Bad Omens Concrete Jungle #1 from Sumerian Comics is written by Noah Sebastian and Kevin Rodatelli. Art and letters, or I should say art and colors by Nicola Izzo. Letters by Steve Ekstrom, and the main cover A is by Chuck P. So many letters, and I'm getting confused with myself. Sorry about that, but okay, let's get into it. So, what is this issue about? You jump right into the action, and the story is about this gang called the Bad Omens Gang. And they are in a turf war or a territory war with another gang called the Atomic 6 Crime Syndicate. And why are they fighting with each other? What's at the heart of this territory fight? It's an art museum right in the middle of their territory that contains oodles and oodles of classic and modern art that all combined is worth billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars. And so what's happening is the Bad Omens gang goes to the museum because the museum sits within their territory by right of the letter of the law, if you will, between warring gangs and who controls what turf and what territory. And the proprietor of the museum says, instead of having an all-out war, because the current proprietor is a member of the Atomic 6 Crime Syndicate, instead of having an all-out war, I'll make you a deal. Why don't you come on in? If you can guess the art price at market value within $10,000, you get to keep every single piece of art that comes within that range. You don't have to fight. You don't have to have the bloody massacre. You just come in. If you can guess right, you take what you want, leave us the museum so we don't have to have a turf war. The Bad Omens gang goes in and says, okay. They go in, but surprise, surprise, it's a trap. And the Atomic 6 Crime Syndicate lays out all kinds of gunfire, booby traps, guards hiding behind walls with automatic machine guns, and things just get violent and pretty harried and chaotic pretty quick. So that's the long and the short of it. There's not a whole lot of meat to the plot, but that's the long and the short of it. So what did we think about this particular issue? First of all, if you like that sort of manga visual appeal, it sort of reminds me of Mob Psycho a little bit if you're into manga, but if not, don't worry about it. There's definitely sort of a manga vibe to this. And in the cyberpunk setting is not strongly prevalent, but it's still there. The two mashed together kind of has an interesting, kind of a hip, cool, cyber futuristic look to it. It's not overly strong, but it's there and it's noticeable and it's kind of aesthetically appealing. Then you have this scenario with warring gangs that go after each other, where the gangs are technologically organized. They have their own sort of look and visual appeal about how they dress compared to each other. In other words, all the members in a particular gang, they sort of dress in a similar style, and you have each gang having a unique identity. And then the gangs are going to war with each other over turf, but there's sort of like a futuristic feel to it. So that's where you get sort of a clockwork orange type of vibe. It's not necessarily hyper violent, although there is a lot of action type violence in this issue. You don't see a lot of blood, and certainly no off color violence as well. But you definitely get that vibe in this particular issue. What didn't we like about the issue? Again, the plot is pretty thin, so that's kind of not quite sure where it's going with it. And there's almost no setup. You're dropped right into the action with a very brief preamble about the two gangs going to war with each other over a territory, and with the intent of taking control of this museum. But that's it. You don't know why they want the museum. You don't know what they would do with the museum if they got it. And what's interesting, as a sort of interesting factoid, is there are certain panels where they show very specific pieces of art that are real life pieces of art. You see actual paintings. You see actual modern art sculptures. You see pieces of art history laid out in this museum, which is fine. That gives that museum a layer of authenticity. But again, you don't know what they would do with it if they got it. It's not like you can pick up a Monet or a Rembrandt and just sell it on the street. These items are priceless. You wouldn't know what to do with it if they got it. So even though there's some conversation within the comic about how the museum has a ridiculously high street value, or I should say market value, that's meaningless because if you can't sell it, there's no point to it. So it's worth something, but then again, it's not worth anything because you would never be able to sell this art. So you'd own it, but you couldn't do anything with it. So the motivation is sort of unclear, other than the gangs want to fight with each other to control it. But that's so superficial. It doesn't really go anywhere. So that's the downside of this issue. What do we think about the art? Just a quick word on that. Again, it's a manga style. It sort of looks interesting in the use of blacks and whites and reds. These aren't like bold poppy colors. There's sort of a black and white noir feel to it, although there are some intermixing of colors, primarily reds and blues for saturation, to give it a sort of a patina to the different panels. So some panels are all blue, some panels are all red. So it kind of works to give it a noir feel, which is kind of visually interesting. And the most amusing fact of this, or the most amusing thing that we saw in this particular comic, is the creators played with onomatopoeia so that the sound effects actually give part of the narration. And that's not a new trick. We've seen that done before, but I don't think we've seen it done exactly this way. So like, for example, the gunfire in this particular case, because it's sort of like a laser gun, it makes a VoIP sound. It goes VoIP, 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 VoIP. And then the VoIP starts inserting itself into the conversation a little bit. So it's a little odd, but it's amusing in a weird sort of way. So in this case, the art really is what makes this comic unique and a standout. So final thoughts. What do we think about Bad Omens Concrete Jungle #1? It's an entertaining mashup of cyberpunk manga with a little bit of a clockwork feel. The concept is interesting, but the lack of motivations make it hard to kind of really get invested. It just feels like people doing things. And the art is good. It's not super clean, it's not super clear or particularly interesting, but it's the little weird touches like the use of saturated colors for entire panels, and particularly on the lettering. That's where the art really stands out. The character work is just okay. The vehicle work and the backgrounds are just okay. There's not a lot of detail, it's okay, but it's the unique touches that make it stand out. Therefore, we're going to give Bad Omens Concrete Jungle #1 from Sumerian Comics a 6 out of 10. And speaking of motivations, this week's op-ed is on the future of the comics industry and what's motivating both retailers and the publishers to make changes for the year to come. And that all came out of this past week's Comics Pro 2024 announcements. And some of that could change things that you know about Sumerian Comics and any other publisher that you can think of. So stay tuned through the outro to check out the link to that video, and we'll see you soon.